learning the difference between selling and closing, why Zig Ziglar matters more today than ever before, and how Mark Timm and the Ziglar organization are setting the agenda for the future of sales. All right. Joey Ramone said, hey ho, let's go. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Legends and Losers. If this is your first time up at bat, so to speak, well, welcome. Thank you so much for checking us out. And if you're a regular consumer of Legends and Losers, I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. We have an incredible guest today, and I thought we had a very fun dialogue where I learned a lot. And if you're a salesperson, a sales executive, an entrepreneur, or really anybody who needs to try to get shit done in life, this is a great episode because our guest is Mark Timm, and he is the president and CEO of the Ziglar family, and also a business called Cottage Garden. And the Ziglar organization is making some big strides, and they have an incredible podcast that I was lucky enough to be a guest on with Agent Kevin Miller as host, a spectacular show. And Mark is really working with the leadership team at the Ziglar organization and the Ziglar family to really take things to a whole new level. Now, my relationship with Zig goes back to being about 18 or 19. If you're a regular listener, you know a little bit about my story. I got thrown out of school at 18, and so I had to learn by doing, seeking out mentors and coaches, and by learning. And I read some of Zig's books, but most importantly, most impactful for me were the fact that I was able to go to what Zig Ziglar called the Automobile University. He was one of the first sort of evangelists, motivational speakers in this whole area of sales and personal performance. So in that sense, Zig's a very real category designer. And one of the things he did to build the category was he created this term that he used called the Automobile University. So back in the old days, pre-cell phones, pre-podcasts, pre-satellite radio, pre all that stuff, you had dead time in the car and you could listen to music, or you could listen to Zig's tapes, which is what I did. And when I was on the Ziglar show, I referred to Zig as my Uncle Zig, because that's how I got to feel, because in a very real way, Zig taught me to sell, and he sort of has that quality. And so it was a thrill for me to be on the Ziglar show, and it's a thrill to have Mark and the rest of the folks at the Ziglar organization that I've been getting to know over the last couple of months, and of course Kevin Miller, the host of the Ziglar show, in my life. It's just such a cool thrill for me to think that Zig Ziglar taught me to sell. And fast forward to now, to today, and I have these relationships with these unbelievable people in his organization. Now, Mark is a very, very cool guy, and you'll learn a lot about selling in this discussion. He's the president and CEO of the Ziglar family and of a company called Cottage Garden. He has a diverse and fascinating background that includes working at the White House, Kellogg's, the National FAA, and USA Today. He's a great, highly sought-after public speaker. He's a husband and a proud father of 6. And now the legendary Mark Timm is on Legends and Losers. What has Zig meant to you over the years?
Well, I mean, he was a mentor of mine. I mean, can you believe this? Like, imagine going back and being the 15-year-old version of yourself. Okay, now don't think about the things you shouldn't have been doing. Think about the things that you should have been doing. And one of the things that I was
doing a lot of the things I shouldn't have been doing, Mark.
I was at a national youth conference. First time. I'm a farm boy, man. I'm a farm boy from Fillmore, Indiana. I find myself 2 states away. I'd never really traveled before. And I'm in this auditorium with like 15,000 people. And they introduced this motivational public speaker. First motivational speaker I ever heard. Guy's name is Zig Ziglar. How can you forget that, right? It was like he was just speaking to me. I mean, everybody just melted away, and I sat there, and he was talking about, goal setting and about positive mental attitude and I mean, I was just chewing it up. And so as soon as it was over, I like ran to the back of the room and I bought See You at the Top, and I bought a set of cassette tapes, and I wore them out. I mean, I wore them out. So between 15 and 19, I was just pouring in Zig Ziglar because I just couldn't get enough of it. I loved it. And he really, in that way, became a mentor in my life. And then fast forward to 19 years old, I go back to that conference. I get elected their national president. I meet Zig Ziglar. He's the speaker again 4 years later. He invites me to Dallas, Texas. I go to Dallas. I attend Born to Win as his guest. I have dinner with him and the redhead, and that was it. I mean, he had officially solidified his impact in my life as a mentor, and I applied those principles in business for the next couple decades.
Maybe if I took myself off mute, that would be good. Nobody ever accused me of being too smart. And so I can't imagine finding Zig at 15.
Well, I mean, I found Zig at 15 and then at 19, and then I started applying everything that I'd learned, in my life. But the coolest thing actually was finding him again. Okay.
Yeah, later
now,
when you were 19?
No. I'm past 19 now.
Okay,
So 15,
again,
19.
Down the road again.
Down the road, I go on in life. I go to college. I become an entrepreneur. I'm on my 11th venture as an entrepreneur. I've bought companies, sold companies. I sold a company. I bought it back. I sold it again the next day. I mean, I've been a serial entrepreneur most of my life, and I used a lot of those principles in business to be successful. And then here I come full circle, and I find Zig Ziglar again. How did I find him again? Because things weren't going at home the way I wanted them to be. I mean, I was successful in business, but listen, man, I could make 100 decisions with confidence and clarity in business, and I'd walk through the front door, and the first decision I had to make, I'd stumble and fumble. And I thought, this just isn't right. This is not the way I dreamed for it to be. And I started doing inventory of my life, what made me successful in business. And I realized that it was what I was pouring into my head as a young man, and it was Zig Ziglar. And so I actually reintroduced Zig Ziglar into my life through my family. And I reintroduced him to my family, to my children. I've got 6 kids. In fact, you get to see them right back here. And so I've got 6 kiddos. And I wanted to be as successful at home.
I have to ask you, why did you want to have such a small family, though, Mark?
Well, hey, listen, this is what I got to tell you. We did finally figure out how it was happening. And so, so that's the good news. And, so we figured it out, and we got stopped at 6. No. And so actually, to be really honest and blunt, we're the modern day Brady Bunch. And so we're a blended family, 3 boys, 3 girls. And so I did stop at 3. I just ended up marrying an amazing woman who had 3, and we brought our family together, and we call it it was a family merger. Since I'm an entrepreneur, I know all things business wise, and so we
now, was it a merger of equals, or did one take over the other, so to speak?
Yeah, well, that's a whole story in and of itself. But yeah, it was a merger of equals. We in fact, that's how we actually completed the merger, was by incorporating our family, turning our family into a business, and putting everybody on the same platform. In fact, I actually have a real company, Timm's LLC, where my youngest child owns as many shares as I do, because we all bring the same to the table. And so I reconnect with Zig Ziglar. I bring it.
I hate to interrupt you, Mark, but did you because in getting to know a little bit about you, you talk about that you had all this success in your business life, but you realized maybe not as much in your home life. And you talk about this concept of being the CEO of your family. Is that what led you back to Zig?
Yeah, it's what led me back to Zig. Unfortunately, Zig had passed by this point, and so so I didn't get to
remind me what year he passed away, Mark.
Yeah, he passed away 4 years ago, so that would have been 13, and so so it's been a few years, and that was about the time frame that my transformation took place, and it went down like this. So I'm having success in life, but not at home the way I wanted to, and the way I feel like I was put on earth to have success. I'm sitting in my driveway. And I'm literally, my driveway is 1/3 of a mile long, and I'm sitting there like I'm sitting there because nobody at my house can see me sit there. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? Why am I not finishing this last third of a mile? And I'm just sitting there. And I'm disappointed in myself. I'm frustrated with myself. And I'm like, I had a killer day that day, like amazing entrepreneurial business. You know, we've all had those days. And I didn't want to go home and get hit with the reality of chaos, drama, and confusion. And so I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden it hit me. What if the most valuable business that I will ever own, ever operate, ever found, ever be a part of was the business I was going home to instead of the business I went to that morning? How would I be looking at this differently? What would I be doing differently? And I finished the drive. I went in, I grabbed my wife. I said, I got to share something with you. And I started sharing with her things that help make me successful in business. And I asked her if I could apply those to our family. She was just stoked that I was fired up about our family. And so she's like, yeah, let's do it. And so I started doing the things that made me successful in business at home, like incorporating our family, like having regular meetings, like we have a mission statement, we have a logo, we have shareholder meetings, all the stuff that I do in business, I started doing them at home. Everything changed. And it was at that point that I said, wait a minute, what else have I done in my life? What helped make me successful in business? And it was Zig Ziglar. I mean, there were some other people as well, but I clearly identified that Zig Ziglar was a huge part of that. So I started bringing Zig Ziglar into our family in the way that I had digested his content, 30 years ago. And it started making an impact immediately on our family, on our kids. And at that point, I started sharing what I was doing with my family, and it didn't take very long for the children of Zig Ziglar, Tom Ziglar, Julie Ziglar, Cindy Ziglar, to find me and what I was doing with my family with their father's content. And then at that point, they were like, hey, this was our dad's dream, was to impact families all over the world. Business, man, they couldn't get enough of Zig Ziglar. And so, but he still wanted to impact families. That was a passion of his. And so most of them have older children. I'm in the trenches. And so that's why they tapped me and said, you come in here, you love our father, and we love what you're doing with your family. Why don't you lead the Ziglar effort to families all over the world? And that's how I reconnected with the actual Ziglar family.
How exciting. And so what is the Ziglar, you tell me how to think about it. Is it a family initiative, or tell me what you're doing with the Ziglars around family?
Yeah, it's real straightforward. I mean, we're really operating it in a nonprofit, kind of way, where we're trying to just take all of Mr. Ziglar's time-tested, proven wisdom and make it available to families all over the world. And so we do it. In fact, anybody can go to ziglarfamily.com and see the resources that we have available there. But we're taking his stories, his impact, his wisdom, distilling it down to families. Now, why is this relevant, and where's my family come into play? Well, I already told you that my family is, we came from a place of chaos and drama, which means we can probably relate to any family out there.
Yeah, I was going to say, there are no other families that have chaos and drama, Mark, so I don't know that anybody can relate.
You know what's so awesome is that we now have over 50,000 families. 50,000 families are part of Ziglar family. And what's so cool is that we all now know that we're not on an island all by ourselves. All right. We all have chaos and drama, and we all need each other. We weren't put on this earth to be alone as humans, and we weren't put on this earth to be alone as families. And Zig Ziglar is kind of the tie that brings us together, because either these are families that knew Zig Ziglar, that had parents who knew Zig Ziglar, or they want their family to have the kind of character and the kind of integrity that Zig Ziglar brought to the table. And so we take his content, we distill it down, and we match it up with the messy modern family. That's what I call our family. We're the messy modern family. And I'm not talking about our family room or our kitchen, although there are days that's a mess too. But I'm talking about the messiness of life. We're all busy and crazy, and technology overtakes us. And so we're messy, but we're also modern. You match that with the time-tested, proven wisdom of Zig Ziglar, and you've got a formula for success in a messy modern world. You see, one thing we found about the families is they're not lacking information. In fact, there's too much information. They go to Google and get overwhelmed. So what they're lacking is information they can trust. That's the one thing that I would say that we bring to the table is we bring a trusted brand, because Zig Ziglar may not be the biggest brand in the world, but you'll be hard pressed to find a brand that's more trusted than the Zig Ziglar brand.
Yeah, and I do want to get to that with you because I'm fascinated, A, by the brand in general, and B, sort of how you guys think about it going forward. But before we get there, I just wanted to share with you, about a little over a decade ago, Mark, I sort of made this commitment to myself that I wanted to get a black belt in happiness.
I like
And
that.
yeah, and so I started doing a lot of reading of the research into happiness, because we're now about 40 or 50 years into a more science-oriented approach to research. Have you seen the movie Happy by any chance?
Just Happy, or the
Yeah,
one that
the
was
movie's called Happy. It's based on a whole set of research into what are the things that make people happy.
not seen it?
Anyway, there's a couple things that sort of triggered on some of the happiness research I've done. In the movie Happy, one of the things they make very clear is, and I don't know if they use these exact words, so I'm paraphrasing, but essentially there's no such thing as a lonely centenarian. And what I've been thinking about in that regard, to your point on family and relationship, if you think about human beings, the number one worst torture that we put our worst criminals through is we put them in solitary confinement.
Mm.
And so if you think the greatest sort of punishment for a human being is to leave them alone in a room with themselves, then sort of the corollary is true, that you and I thrive on relationship. And then very recently what I read was fascinating, that the quality of our primary relationship, so if we're married, our spouse, or whoever our primary relationship is with, at the age of 50 is one of the primary indicators of longevity, even more so than our DNA.
I couldn't agree more. And I love that. I love that analogy, and I love that because I believe it. And I'm going to tell you something else that's going to rock your world, and that is we just completed a bunch of research about the whole idea of quality relationships, friendships, connectivity, because by all rights, the data says that we're more connected today than we've ever been, because we can pick up one of these things we carry around all the time, and we literally can say, I have 1,000 friends. I have 2,000 friends. I have 10,000 friends. I have 200 friends. Doesn't matter. However, what we're finding is that never before in the history of recording, and we looked over a 35, 40-year period, people feel more lonely today than they have in any modern time of data. And it's because they don't actually have real relationships with the people that they say are their friends. And so here we are saying that the quality of your relationship at 50 with those that are significant matters. And I think you could expand that ring out a little bit more to real friends, that the quality of that probably contributes to longevity as well. And yet we're entering an era that technology is actually helping us be the least connected than we've ever been. And that's a little scary if you ask me.
Well, and interestingly, to that point, Mark, there's also a lot of research out there that suggests the loneliest demographic, at least in America, are men over the age of, I think it's 35, and that most American men do not make a significant male relationship past college.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's some serious stuff.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, there's a lot of guys who their best friend is their wife or their spouse,
yeah.
and I'm not suggesting that that's necessarily a bad thing, but as much as I love my wife Carrie, and I don't think of her as my best friend in that way, right? It's very clear to me that men need to have strong male friends, and women need to have strong female friends, and we need to live in a great family or a tribe, or however we want to think about, to your point, you guys have constructed a family, right? So it's, when you say family, it's not always just the people that we grew up with or the people we share blood with, but the family of our choosing. But regardless, that men and women need powerful relationships outside of their spousal relationship, and most importantly for men, we're very lonely. We don't talk to anybody, and we don't develop meaningful relationships past college.
Well, I think you're right, and I hope that changes, and I think it has to change, and maybe with this research out, it'll start to change. I know for me, it was easy. Like I said, when things weren't going so well at home, it was easy. It's so funny because especially us men, when someone asks, "How's your family?" It's, "Oh, great. Oh, good." I mean, my family, I'll be giving a speech and I'll say, "How important is your family next to your faith?" And we'll have, sometimes people will raise two hands. It'll be every hand out there says it's the most important thing to my life. Yet the actions don't really support that. And so, but I can tell you that just by listening to, good, wholesome content like what we're talking about here today, Mr. Zig Ziglar used to say that you can change who you are and where you are by changing one thing, and that's what you put into your mind. You change that one thing. We think it's so complicated, but it's not. I give the example of my teenage son, my oldest son, 19. He was going through his toughest part of his life at that point. He was 17. He was in a foreign country, 8,000 miles away, and he had hurt himself. You talk about getting a black belt. He was in China studying martial arts and Mandarin, but he hurt himself, and I had to come over and get him. And he was embarrassed. He was devastated. And I couldn't get there for about 3 weeks. It wasn't life-threatening, but his training was over and his time was over, and I had to get him back. And during that 3-week period, he started listening to motivational speeches. And he didn't have anything else to do, and he couldn't call people. And so he listened to motivational speeches. He listened to Biscuits, Fleas, and Pump Handles by Zig Ziglar. He listened to it 17 times along with other motivational speeches. And by the time I got there, we started talking about, what does this accident make possible? What is now possible because of this unfortunate event? That combined with what he had put in his head, this kid has been on a tear for the last 2 years. He has just been, he's just life transformation. He's got a motorcycle and he travels with a Bluetooth speaker on his back and a little backpack, listening to motivational speeches. Powerful motivational speakers as he's, hauling down the highway with his motorcycle. And it just has been transformational to him. And the only thing that changed was what he was putting in his head. And now he finished school strong. He's got big ambitions. The world is wide open to him. What looked like everything he had thought and dreamed and planned was over, now has been blown wide open because he changed what he was putting in his head. And we have that same ability. You do, I do, people we love, our friends, we all have that ability, but we got to change the input to get a different output.
It sounds so almost trite, and sort of almost pop psychology, but it's so true. I can remember, when you were kind enough, you and Kevin were kind enough to have me on the Ziglar show, our dialogue about that. I know what it's like to be that 18, 19, 20-year-old man, or man. I wasn't a man at those ages, but
young man,
young man, driving around my beat up old Toyota, trying to make it work, listening to Zig. And, it could easily sound corny to some people, but it makes a gigantic difference. And I was pulling up the quote because I wanted to get it right. It's one of my favorite Zig quotes where he says, "People often say that motivation doesn't last. Well, neither does bathing. That's why we recommend it daily."
It's awesome.
I love that quote.
Do you know how many super uber successful people have done it off that quote? They basically said, I'm going to have good days and bad days, but the one thing I'm not going to miss is my daily dose of motivation because I need it every single day. Every single day. And we get so busy, we forget how we got here. We forget, that we listened to tapes when we were desperate and young and we didn't know how we were going to accomplish our dreams. We invested time and motivation. And then we get older and we're like, man, we're kind of in this rat race and we're turning in circles, and we forget that we can get there again, but we got to change the input to get a different output. And when I say input, I'm not talking about, but TV or I'm not talking about just, I'm talking about good input that can be transformational, and you got to be willing to commit to it multiple times, and that's why Zig said 16 times. If you want to commit it to memory, 16 times. One time is not enough. Bathing once a month is not enough. I mean, people will tell you that. Just try it.
It depends. I know some people think that's plenty, but
I've had teenagers that thought that was plenty. Trust me, it's not enough.
Yeah, I have friends who think that's plenty. They spend a lot of time in the backcountry, and they think that's more than enough. But I digress. Why do you think it is, Mark, that Zig's message or messages is probably how I should put it, are so timeless?
Well, I'm going to tell you that, so my son's favorite speech is Biscuits, Fleas, and Pump Handles. It's the first recorded speech. It was done in Ohio. He made me sit down and listen to it, even though I've listened to it multiple times. He just wanted me. He was so excited about it. So we're listening to it. This was recorded 45 years ago, probably. I'm going to tell you it's more relevant today than it was 45 years ago. Sometimes when you have someone like Zig Ziglar, who was a complete disruptor to the whole industry of public speaking and motivational speaking, you often look back and see that they were ahead of their time. That what they were sharing was even beyond the time frame that they were in. And so in some ways I would say he was ahead of his time, and then in other ways I'd say he's timeless. And one of the reasons why I feel like he's timeless is because he had a very specific agenda. And the agenda was timeless. And the agenda went like this: to get what I want, all I have to do is help enough other people get what they want. Now, there's lots of ways to say that. I can say, Christopher, to get what you want, you just have to help enough other people get what they want. But he was a walking billboard for that philosophy. And he basically said, okay, there's some things I want in life, and they're important to me, but to get there, I'm just going to help other people get what they want. And that concept, I mean, you can go back, literally thousands of years. This concept, he didn't create this concept, he just lived it. And by living it, it meant that a lot of what he delivered was timeless because it wasn't reflective of that period of time. It was reflective of humanity. I mean, you can go back thousands of years and see, that this principle has existed. It's putting others first.
It's pretty much, I mean, you tell me, it's one of the core tenets of most of the major religions in the world, right?
Without a doubt. I don't think you could probably
love thy brother as thyself, however you pick whatever you want, but it's a core tenet of deep human values.
And that's exactly right. And because his message was rooted in that made it timeless, because it's been around for thousands of years before Mr. Ziglar was around. Now, I'm going to say the other piece that I would say, so that's what helped make his message timeless, but what's made it stick, okay, and this is real, Christopher, this is real. You could spend the rest of your day searching on the internet to try to find some dirt on Zig Ziglar. You're not going to find it. Because he lived his message. He lived it, okay? He was a man of integrity, a man of honor, a man of character, and he said, look, if I'm going to influence people, I got to live the message. I can't just speak it. I've got to walk the talk. I've got to walk the walk that I'm sharing with other people. So the combination of a very timeless message of putting others first and helping others before you help yourself, combined with the fact that he was willing to commit to a life to live that message, is what makes it continue to move on, because it's not tainted. There's nothing in the past that says, oh, well, now we learned about this and it discredits him. He exited this earth, with a tremendous amount of credibility and respect, and it was intentional. And so I think the combination of those two is why he had the impact that he had, but also why he's going to continue to have that impact for generations to come.
The other thing I love about Zig is, at a very high level, there's all of his amazing content and techniques about how to be a great salesperson, right? And so he taught me to sell in my automobile university, right? because I didn't have any experience and I needed to figure that stuff out. And so there's, all the great stuff about asking questions and listening and all of the core basic skill sets that you need to have. And then, Zig takes it to a whole other place where back in the day, I think first of all, there weren't very many people doing any kind of the sales training that he was doing, but he went into that human side, right? So another one of my favorite Zig quotes is, gratitude is the healthiest of all human emotions. And today we hear, to your point about Zig being ahead of his time, today we hear a lot about gratitude, so much so that, I hear people say, oh, I'm very grateful or this or that. And it can sound a little empty or a little bit BS-y. Like you follow somebody on Twitter and their autoresponder says, I'm grateful you're following me on Twitter. I'm like, really? I don't know that that's the right use of the word grateful. But to your point on Zig being ahead of his time, you hear gratitude, in our culture in a way today that you never heard it before. And so not only did he bring the sort of sales technique stuff, but on the sort of what you put in your mind is what you get out of your life front, he gave us a lot of the things to put in our minds that, to your point, today are viewed as, sort of, aha, no kidding, or but back then it was like, maybe I should be more grateful.
Well, here's what I can say about what I know, of his life, specifically is that, so he talks about gratitude and, he talked about it a lot then. And so now you're right. Some of this timeless, some of this kind of wisdom has been, a little bit overdone in that regard. But when I look back, there's so many stories that I can tell you. So, you talked about a prisoner on, being in solitary confinement. Since Mr. Ziglar's passing, stories have just poured out. One of which was there was an inmate on death row that got a hold of his cassette tapes in the prison library and started listening to it, and basically wished he had, found it obviously much earlier, but took the time to say, I'm going to write to this man and tell him what kind of an impact he's had. All right. Mr. Ziglar hand wrote on legal page a 6-page letter back to this guy. Now, this guy can't buy any of his stuff. This guy can't go attend a seminar. This guy's not paying $500 to go hear him speak or buying any of his stuff. He never even bought the product to begin with. And he writes a 6-page handwritten letter to this guy on death row. And I've had other people come up to me and say, I lost my wife. A motivational speaker that I know, his wife passed. And Zig and him had spoke on the same stage at one point in time, and they befriended each other, but they weren't close friends. And this guy gets a 4-page legal handwritten letter from him, saying, hey, you can survive this, you can push through, but here's things to think about. And so it was that piece of it that he was willing to do that so many of us now, just aren't willing to do, which is to not just auto respond, I'm grateful, okay, but to actually take the time to tell people that you're grateful and to respond to them and to pour out your heart, even if there's nothing you can gain from it. And so, and I think that's the difference too, is that, he didn't have an autoresponder. I mean, he barely got involved in the computer age at all. Everything was handwritten.
Didn't have a chat bot that automatically told all of his Twitter followers that he was grateful.
Not a chance. In fact, most of his communications was on a legal pad, handwritten. So when you look back, and people look at, how, and they say, well, he lived grateful, because if you were in his life, in fact, there's a wall he has of gratitude in his corporate office, and he's identified, I want to say it's about 25 people that shaped who he was. And he went so far as to get a picture of them and to tell their story and to memorialize them. I mean, I think we should all do this. We should all look at who made us who we are today and make sure that we have memorialized our gratitude of them so that they forever know and we forever are reminded that we are a product of people who cared and poured deeply into our lives. We just move on so quickly. We use autoresponders to tell people thank you and that we're grateful, instead of framing a picture of a person and putting it on a wall so that we could see it every day like he did. I mean, I love that. And it's something I want to emulate someday.
It's very powerful, and it's funny. There's this myth in our Western world. You know, if you read the media, particularly around whether it's athletes or artists, and of course business leaders. And when you read a story in Fortune about some extraordinary business leader, or Sports Illustrated about Steph Curry from the Warriors, or pick your sports hero, there's this sort of narrative that often emerges of this sort of amazing superhuman person who rises from wherever they rise and conquers all and becomes a champion. And you get the impression that they did it on their own. And there's nobody that I know that's a self-made success. And yet there's this myth that gets perpetuated in the media that, oh, you're a self-made woman, you're a self-made man. And the truth is everybody else makes us successful. And it's interesting how easily we can forget that.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And the powerful thing to do is to periodically take inventory, and so take inventory of our lives and remember who made us and take the time to handwrite a note of gratitude to those people, because everybody's throwing around, like you said, gratitude.
What do you mean? You'd actually write something on a piece of paper and send it to them in the post? What year is this, Mark?
Yeah, I know. I mean, isn't that crazy? It's crazy, but yet I can't tell you. I've received tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of emails in the last year, tweets, emails, like you name it. Okay, means of communication. But I can sit here and recall the 4 or 5 handwritten notes that I've received this year. And
yeah.
The ones that people actually wrote me a handwritten note, because it's so rare and, and it's so impactful and it's so meaningful. And so, yeah, I think if you want to really express gratitude, either A, handwritten note, or B, go see the person face to face, look them in the eyes and tell them how grateful you are. I think not only would they appreciate it, but I think it would be rocket fuel for your life, because remembering how we got here, is like nitric oxide to our future, of realizing we're not alone. Like we may feel lonely, especially you were talking about some of us men at the age that we are, going back and doing that inventory,
Well, you and I are very young, Mark.
What's that?
You and I are very young, but for guys who are a little further along.
There you go.
But there's another thing I've learned recently. So, do you know John Ruhlin by any chance, Mark?
I don't.
The giftology guy.
I mean, I've heard of the giftology, but I don't know him personally.
Yeah, that's the name of his book, and he's made a career out of teaching people to be grateful and to do this kind of acknowledgement and to send them a gift that would be meaningful to them. And we had him on Legends and Losers, and the whole time I just kept thinking, geez, what an unthoughtful piece of crap I am as we're talking to John. And then I had this experience not long ago. You remember Bill Walton, the legendary and NBA champion,
yep,
and now Hall
absolutely.
of Famer. So, Mark, I had an opportunity to meet him at a speaking event that both of us were doing for NetSuite in San Diego. And I was blown away. Because if ever there was a guy who could have an ego, if ever there was a guy who could think he was better than you, it would be Bill. And Bill is the opposite of that. And he and I had a great connection. We ended up having dinner together, I, and Jason Maynard, the head of marketing at NetSuite. And we had a spectacular time after kind of the event had wound down. And afterwards, he sent me the most extraordinary gift pack you could imagine. An autographed copy of his book where he wrote a very personal note to me that was incredibly heartfelt. And then a stack of autographed photographs from his entire career from UCLA, all the way through. And when this arrived, I was knocked over. I thought, I have nothing to buy from him. There's no reason for him to do this other than for him to acknowledge that we had a great evening together and a lot of fun. And he just wanted to send me this awesome stuff. And I was completely knocked over by it. It was so powerful.
Uh, I've had a few experiences like that myself, particularly when I've been traveling overseas. There are some overseas countries where giving gifts is, it's a 10x to what we know. I stayed with a family in Japan one time, and I really took, in reality, trinkets and trash. Really, comparatively, I took T-shirts and hats and pins and all the stuff we like to give as Americans. And I pass out these gifts to this family on the last day I was there. And next thing you know, I see the mother. Actually, the father went first, and he disappeared. And he came back, and he handed me this thing made out of Japanese coins, and it was what his 16-year-old best friend had given him to memorialize their friendship. And that friend was no longer on the earth; he had passed away, and that was his memory of him. And he gave that to me. The mother went away and brought me back a kimono that she had worn in her wedding to give to my mother. The grandmother went away and got a stone from World War I that her husband had given to her. And then the piece that just sent it over the top was this little boy, their only child, watched all this happen. And I had seen him every night. I would go say goodnight to him as I stayed with their family, and I saw him tuck into bed, and he had a little routine and special little stuffed animals, and this one that he held on to. And I noticed that he was not there, and his name was Lee. And next thing I know, I see Lee coming down the stairs, and Christopher, you probably know where this is going. He walks down with his most treasured stuffed animal, his stuffed whale, that he slept with every night for his entire memory since he could remember, and he couldn't sleep without it. But yet he saw his family give gifts of gratitude of a nature that the only thing he could think of that had that value was this whale. And he handed it to me, and I started to hand it back, and he started crying because he didn't think it was a good enough gift. And then I start crying, and we just hug each other. And I'm here to tell you that some decades later, I still have that whale. I still have that whale.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, there is the gift of gratitude. And if you've ever experienced it, remember what it felt like, and then ask yourself if you can give that same gift to someone else. And it doesn't have to be expensive. This little whale probably cost $5, but it was one of the most valuable gifts I've ever been given in my life.
Well, and the interesting thing about this is, to your point earlier around how in some ways the digital technology can actually make us feel more disconnected than connected, which is a shame. Of course, it's meant to be the opposite. And so in a world of 140 characters and emojis and memes and Kardashians and all of that, particularly that go, fast, 250 emails a day or more, all of that. When we stop and we do something to have a human connection, it makes such a gigantic difference.
Oh, it makes a huge difference. I mean, it really does make a difference. You just can't, you can't put a value. I mean, I was thinking as you were talking that in some circles, an emoji is considered a gift, a gratitude. I took the time to pick some little character to show you what I think of you or think of your response. I mean, that's how we've distilled it down, to that level. So that personal human contact with friends and family. I mean, my family now does technology free time. I mean, because we can't connect with each other with technology anymore. And here's the point I want to make.
So you think, I hate to interrupt you, Mark, but you think for the family sitting down for dinner where all six of the kids and you and your wife are sitting there and everybody's on a smartphone or a tablet, you think that's not the way the family should get together and have dinner?
It's definitely not the way. And I'm going to be the first to say that as much as kids get a bad rap and teenagers get a bad rap, because I got all teenagers, one of the reasons we did it is because my wife and I needed it. We were bad. And so we were two of the most guilty of the whole family. So we stack the phones on the table. We say technology on the table. Everybody stacks it up. If we're out eating, I say the first one that touches their phone pays the bill. And so that keeps the phone right there. And, but we're back to
I like that one. The first
yeah,
one
we're
to touch their smartphone is buying dinner. And
buying
we're
dinner.
ordering steaks and we got some Chateau de la Ding Dong wine coming. And so this is going to be an expensive one.
Yep.
I like
Yep.
that.
No,
Can I
it
steal
works.
that one
Trust
from
me.
you, Mark?
What's that?
Can I steal that idea from you,
You
Mark?
can steal it. It's all yours,
I
buddy.
love it.
It's all
I love it.
yours.
Now
So
I gotta ask you about this the Ziglar family and the business today. So
yeah.
it's clear that Zig Ziglar became the category designer and then ultimately the category king of sales motivational speaker. I mean, I don't know that you can really debate that. And the interesting thing today is, of course, Mr. Ziglar's not here. And so how do you guys, as you think about the business, continue to build and extend your category leadership in the absence of Zig Ziglar being alive? That seems like an interesting challenge.
So really, Zig Ziglar, the brand missed the digital shift. So Mr. Ziglar's still doing live speeches, and all of a sudden this digital age comes in. Social media didn't exist, and there was no Facebook, Twitter, any of this. So he passes, and then what ends up happening, Christopher, is there's this pent-up demand for his
Yeah,
content, but it's not available the way people are consuming content now. It's
right.
only available through books and DVDs. And like, I'm talking to a guy yesterday, and he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Mark, I don't even own a DVD player," and a lot of people don't. So the content is so relevant and so powerful, but it's not available. So you go through these years, and then all of a sudden, in a couple years ago, we say, well, what do we think the demand really is? So we pop up a Facebook page. All right. Here, get this. In the last 3 years, we've gone from, just a few Facebook followers to 4.5 million. We opened up
Incredible.
an Instagram account just over a year ago, and we have 400,000 followers and growing by 500 to 1,000 a day. That's no advertising. We're not paying anything to get those people there. It just tells you the Ziglar show that you were on.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you guys are a top show. And as a podcaster, I mean, I know how hard that is to accomplish. And you have one of the top shows in the world on any platform.
And so here's this show that we're
How long
inviting
you been
guests.
doing the show now?
Okay, so the show, you got to understand, the show originally came out when Mr. Ziglar was alive. Then he passes, and the show just stays dormant. And then it was only a couple years ago that we re-engaged it. So really, it's coming up on maybe 2 years of re-engagement. And again, when we picked it back up as dormant, we had no listeners. And now, a good show, we're tens of thousands, multiple tens of thousands of downloads. And that's people, obviously they're tuning in to hear awesome guests like you, but they're also tuning in to
I don't think they're tuning in for me. I think they're tuning in for you and the Ziglar family, and of course, Agent Kevin Miller, and of course, the man himself.
Yeah, well, Kevin, I want to give credit where credit's due. Kevin Miller has done a fantastic job of bringing that show back to life, and he's a fantastic host. And I think you talk about that daily or regular dose of motivation. That's what we want to be on the Ziglar Show. Is we want to inspire true performance. And so we don't want to tell you what your true performance is. We want to inspire you to find out what your true performance is and then give you the rocket fuel to get there. And so that's what we're trying to do on the Ziglar Show.
Now, you guys have been hinting on email with me about some changes coming in the show. Do you want to come clean, so to speak, and tell me what you're up to with one of the number one podcasts in the world?
The deal. We bring in awesome guests who really do inspire true performance, but they often come in with a specific message. Maybe it's a book, a platform, something they want to share. And that's cool. I mean, I love that. But here's the deal. When we get our feedback and follow-up, there's always, like, when we have dialogue before the show starts or after the show's over, we always find out that there's something that made that success. Like there was somebody or something that they actually attribute the reason they were successful to that didn't make it on the show. And they also often share that there's something they struggled with along the way to achieving this point of the journey of their potential. So we're going to continue to do the show format, interviewing guests and really getting to the heart of a powerful topic. But then we're going to go into the behind the scenes. We're going to pull back that curtain, do a little Wizard of Oz and pull the curtain back and find out something else that maybe people don't know about what contributed to their success. And we're also going to find out maybe a struggle along the way. And we're going to try to hit those topics of physical, mental, the balance of life, because we're not one-dimensional. In fact, Mr. Ziglar said life is like a wheel. And if you want to be successful, you've got to be successful on that wheel of life. And he identified 7 areas. And we're planning to hit those 7 areas in the show so that we can cover all the areas that help you be balanced and be successful. Because if we're a 10 on physical, but we're a 2 on mental, that wheel's not going to roll very well. Okay. If we've got, great work, our work is a 10, but our finances are a 2, then that's not going to work. And so, so you want balance in life. And so we're going to hit the balance through the show. We're going to pull back the curtains. And then of course, we're going to dive into some inspiring Zig wisdom. And so we're going to go from 1 show a week to 3 shows a week, because
Wow.
we found that bathing once a week is not enough. And so we're going to give people 3 days a week of
Wow.
motivational bathing of Zig Ziglar.
That's a big uptick in content creation. So sort of, why triple the output, so to speak?
Well, it goes right along with what you were talking about earlier in terms of motivation. What we find is that once a week is not enough. And we also find that to get deep enough, okay, there's all these books, deep work and deep thinking. I mean, everybody, the whole surface thinking, we live on the surface, but we're really interested in the depth, and we can't get there. We can't get deep enough in one show.
Yes.
And so,
yes, you are so on it. So I'm going to maybe have a bit of a tangent here with you, Mark.
okay.
What drives me crazy is I think we now live in a world where there's just a ton of BS coming at us. And we had Eric Weinmeier on a while ago. He's the first blind man to summit Everest. He'd be great on your show if you want an introduction.
Awesome.
I'd be happy to introduce you. And he also is the first blind guy to solo kayak the Grand Canyon. And he came on Legends and Losers. And I was asking him about what it was like for him to become more and more famous, and sort of did he, the fact that he had to promote himself as kind of a celebrity and how he felt about that. And his response was, the world doesn't need more bullshit. And so he was trying to say that, how grounded he tries to be he has an amazing foundation that helps disabled people of all kinds of disabilities do incredible things. And he's really an amazing man who wants to give back. And so here's my point. I think a lot of podcasters, Mark, they take what is essentially a radio show idea and stick it on the internet. And if you take Eric as an example, if he were to go on, and I don't want to pick on anybody, so I won't name, any radio show or whatever, but if he was to go on a national radio show, you might get 3 to 5 minutes with him. If he was on a national TV show, if they did a 60 minutes profile, maybe they have, at most you'd get 8 or 10 minutes with him. And for some reason, I think podcasters have sort of had a bit of a radio or TV mentality. Well, we don't have a constraint called time unless we want to force one. And when you get a legendary person, why not hang out with them? Why not have a real conversation with them? And if that's, in the case of Legends and Losers, sometimes that's a 2-hour conversation. But we don't have to be constrained. And so I think what you're doing is amazing, because podcasting, I think, is in its infancy. And we as podcasters, I think, are learning how to use this medium to do something that is the opposite of the Kardashians. That's the opposite of 140 characters, where we can have real conversations, real dialogues with real people and go in depth. And if they go long, so what? We don't have to be constrained.
Well, We're going to actually, so in the case of like Eric or yourself, he would influence all three shows. All three shows. The first show would be, that mission of helping others that he wants to have. The second show would be pulling back that curtain and diving in. If you will, it's the conversation that happens when you hit stop recording. Because we found that when we would hit stop recording, it would be like, that's the deep dive. We were finally getting there. We finally hit pay dirt and it was time to stop. And we would be like, wait a minute. We should be recording this. This is like money. This is what everybody wants to hear. And we've already hit stop recording. And so that was the inspiration for saying, let's go ahead and we'll get through the surface part, but we're going to be digging deep. And then when we hit pay dirt, we're going to keep going. And that's going to be the second show. And then the third show is going to be inspired from, we are going to, let our guests actually share their Zig story and share how they were impacted by him. And most of our guests were, or it could even be in modern times. And we're going to take whatever aspect that they have, a favorite quote, a favorite story, something in their life, and then we're going to distill that on Friday. So that guest will be able to go just deeper and deeper as the week goes on. So the three shows are it's motivation, more motivation, but also the deeper dive that we desperately want to get, that we seem to get to when we hit stop record, and we want to keep going and not hit stop record and let people go on that deep dive with us and really get to know our guests and really get to know what it takes to be successful.
I just love it so much because you're taking advantage of the medium in a way that I hope more podcasters over time do, because we can get into it, right? So why wouldn't we? And let the audience decide if they want to fast forward or they want whatever you want to do, right? It's okay. It doesn't have to be all scripted and soundbitey and all of that. And so I just love that you are really exploring the medium and going beyond sort of the typical quick interview BS and getting to an authentic dialogue that matters.
Well, without a doubt, our audience was telling us, hey, look, I wish you could have gone deeper here, or I wish I would have known more about this. And so they were already telling us that they had a desire to know more and to go deeper and to pull the curtains back. And that's the reality piece. That's the real piece. The beginning stuff, it's not scripted. We're not working off scripts, but it's surface. It's surface, and we're swallowed in surface, and the BS that we're just swallowed in that. I mean, that's that's just consuming us in drama, and we crave this realness. We crave this authentic, and sometimes it takes time to get to that point. And when we're there, it's over. And so by the time we get there, if you're inspired by the performance, if you're inspired by the message or the story of Monday, you bet you're going to show up on Wednesday. And if you're inspired by the pulling the curtain back, you bet you're going to be there on Friday to find out, the more the behind the scenes or some of the secret sauce. And so we just feel like it takes that much to do it right. And it means we're going to be super selective on our guests because they're going to really be driving the entire week along with Mr. Ziglar's content. And so we're going to be really selective in that regard, but we feel like we're going to be able to deliver something that would be impossible in one show.
I love it. And the other thing I love it about what you're doing is you will for sure create an environment by kind of constructing it this way where your guests will get out of interview mode. You know what I mean? And it's something that we've aspired to from the very beginning, because if and it was like when you guys had me on, I didn't feel like I was being interviewed. I felt like the three of us were having a conversation.
I loved it.
And I think what happens is, and look, there's a place for interviews, so I don't want to sound too much like a zealot about this, but I think podcasting allows for authentic dialogue. And I think there's a difference, because if you're the interviewer and I'm the interviewee, you're going to have your questions, and I'm going to have my sound bites and my talking points, and we're going to do that. And I'm going to play the role of author or whatever I'm supposed to be, and you're going to play the role of host or whoever you're supposed to be, and we're going to do that. And anybody at any level of certainly business success, or even athletes and so forth, has been media trained. I don't think the world wants more of that, right?
I couldn't agree more. I don't think so at all. I think, again, we've lost the art of being real.
Yes,
we've lost the
yes.
art of just being genuine and being honest. And yet, here's the crazy thing. Okay, it's like this. Okay, I'm just blown away at this. I'm going to digress for just a second, and I'll connect it to you. Right now, when I grew up, hard work and work ethic. I was a farm boy. It was a given. Like you didn't have to say, hey, is this kid a good worker or whatever? It was a given. Right now, if I had my kids, if they leave my house and they are hard workers and they're known as having a good work ethic, I won't have to worry about them providing for their family at all, because it's the rarest of traits, especially in young people today, is work ethic. So it sticks out like a sore thumb. You can climb the ladder, fast that way. And so, whereas just 2 generations ago, it was expected and everybody had it, and now it's really rare. I think the same thing has happened with authentic, realness of, is that it's so rare now that when we see it, we're attracted to it instantly. We're drawn to it. I
Yes.
mean, you don't even have to say it out loud. You just recognize it and say, whoa, that person's being authentic. They're being real. They're being genuine. And you just find yourself moving towards it, because it is so rare. And whereas just a few generations ago, it was just the world we lived in. But now we're at a place where we want it and we need it and we crave it. And so when it happens, it's like really noticeable. And, the fact is that, I don't know why we don't live there more often, but man, when we do get there, it's powerful. And that's where real impact is made, is that authenticity.
Yep. Now, I also, Mark, I have to ask you about entrepreneurship, because
Sure.
I know you've been an entrepreneur almost your whole life, and you and the Ziglar family have such a huge commitment to entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship, and teaching entrepreneurs to sell, and obviously providing the education and motivation. As you know, we're out at the lowest point in recorded history in American entrepreneurship, and more companies die every week in the U.S. than are founded. And so, what do you think about entrepreneurship today, and what do you think can be done to make a difference in both company starts and inspiring people to really go for it, as well as supporting the entrepreneurs that we have already?
Well, it's awesome that you're asking that, because we're doing something about it. Because what we have found is that there's no lack of ideas. So in the era where more are failing, it's not that they're not starting. And so we live in an era where it's never been easier to be an entrepreneur. Never been easier to start a business. I could literally hang up from here, go start a company. The name's available. I could get my EIN within 15 minutes and have a bank account. I literally could be in business in 30 minutes. So it's never been easier.
And then, I hate to interrupt you, but in the technology business, if you were building any kind of technology, you could also then go to, by way of example, Amazon AWS, set up an account very quickly, and now you have Amazon and Netflix infrastructure to run on.
Yeah, you do.
Right?
You do. So it's never been easier, but what we're missing goes back to what I was telling you with my kids. We're missing that stickiness. We're missing that extra, that motivation, inspiration, the ethic to stick with it. And so we've never had more ideas. It's never been easier, but we're missing the critical ingredient, and that is the stickiness of seeing it through, of recognizing and being. Everybody says, "Oh, just set this up and do this, and you can make millions," but they miss the part of you're going to fail a lot along the way. In fact, I'm being interviewed the other day, and it was by a 19-year-old who said, "You're the most successful person I've ever met." And I didn't know how to take that, and I didn't know if maybe he was just lived a sheltered life. But I looked at him and said, "Here's the thing you need to know. If you believe that, I need to tell you something really important. I've failed more than anybody you probably know in your life. I have failed so many times. In fact, I don't know many people in my life that have failed more times than I have. And so you see me as being a success, but only because I failed so many times and learned from each one. In fact, Zig Ziglar says nobody drowns from falling in water. They drown because they stay there. They don't get up out of the water. And that's the piece that's missing today in American entrepreneurialism, is basically saying, hey, look, here's the deal. You're going to fail. It's not a matter of if you're going to fail. It's a matter of when you're going to fail. The real question is, are you going to learn from it? Are you going to pivot? Are you going to adjust? And I like to say, how fast can you fail? I mean, fail fast, fail often, and learn from all of them, and you will figure it out. But right now, we don't have the stickiness in our young people and our young entrepreneurs. When they fail, that's it. They're out. They're done. Instead of going into it knowing that they're going to fail. And that's where we're coming up to the table. We're actually going to be launching some stuff with Mr. Ziglar's wisdom. One of them is an online masterclass on secrets to closing the sale. Why are we doing that? People don't realize Mr. Ziglar's book, there's 101 closes. 101 ways to close a sale. Okay? And so why are businesses... What's that?
Do you know all 101 yourself?
Not a clue. All of them. I mean, it's amazing. The reason he inspired you is because, like an amazing artist, you look at an artist and say, wow, I wish I could do that. And then they put the brush in your hand and they show you and you go, oh man, I've got some art in me if I could just develop that. Selling was an art form to him, and people took the time to learn how to do it. And here's the deal. You've got all these entrepreneurs out there that are selling, but they're not closing. And that's what he taught us how to do. He didn't teach us how to sell. He taught us how to close. And so the difference between making money and closing your doors is not selling, it's closing the deals. And so we're going to bring that art form back and remind people that it's not as easy as setting up your Amazon account. That's selling. Setting up your Facebook, that's selling. So it's so easy to sell today, but it's not easy to close. Closing is an art form. Closing is the intentionality that makes business and makes millionaires. It's not selling, it's closing. And there are so many tools out there that will teach you how to sell, but not how to close.
Well,
and then all
funny.
of a sudden you realize I'm selling, but I'm not closing anything.
I often find today, and maybe I'm turning into a bit of a grumpy old man, but there are people who don't get what a business result actually is. So to your point on closing, Mark, look, the number of likes we get on Facebook for a post is nice, but I can't go down to my local Safeway and buy groceries with my Facebook likes. And so, yes, I guess on some level it's a result, but it's not the result that we need, right? And so training people in how to close, as a Canadian, the puck needs to get in the net if we're going to win this game, right? I'll never forget years ago. Are you at all a baseball fan, Mark?
Not a big baseball fan.
No. Well, there was this baseball player years ago. He's a very well-known guy back in the 80s named Al Oliver. And towards the end of his career, he ended up playing for the Montreal Expos, my home team, who, of course, don't exist today. They're in Washington. I call them the Washington Expos. But anyway, so we had the All-Star game in Montreal. And the year we had the All-Star game in Montreal, Al Oliver had made the All-Star team. And so the interviewer guy is interviewing Al before the team. And he says to him, Al, what does this National League team need to do today to beat this American League team? And Al looks at him straight in the face and he says, well, Jim, I think if we score more runs than they do, we'll be just fine.
Perfect.
And yet somehow, that can get lost. And the other thing I'll share with you that I think is so important is I meet entrepreneurs in the Silicon Valley in the tech world who more often than not, Mark, are technical in background. They're the person that created this product that they
Yep.
think is awesome, is going to change the world, right? And so I had this conversation with this entrepreneur in the last month or so. And what she said to me was, hey, when we're thinking about hiring our first salesperson, what should we look for? How much should we pay them? Et cetera, et cetera. And this is a very early stage company and has a few kind of alpha customers, but really, to your point, hasn't sold much, if anything. And I said to her, hiring a salesperson would be the stupidest thing you could do right now. You have to learn how to sell. Because as the founder, co-founder, entrepreneur, if you can't figure out how to sell this stuff to your customers, you're never going to have a business. So you have to train yourself. And it's only after you get the first handful of sales, you build those customer relationships, you make those customers successful, and you build your own black belt in selling, that you can really bring people in. Because if you think you can just sit there and be a technical product genius and hire people and it's all going to work out, you're mistaken. The entrepreneur needs to be the best salesperson in the company.
And if I can just twist that a little bit, Christopher.
Please twist me.
They don't have to be the best salesperson. They have to be the best closer.
Amen.
Okay?
Hallelujah.
Because there is such a difference. And that's where a lot of the sales training that's out there is teaching you how to sell, not to close. And that's why people get frustrated. That's why entrepreneurs get frustrated, because they're like, I'm doing everything right. But no, you're not. You're not closing the sale. You're not finishing the sale, because it doesn't count in your bank until you've closed it. Okay?
And
that's
so what
why
are the three big mistakes?
That's why leads don't matter. It's closing the deal.
What are the, and I'll, just pick three as the number, Mark. What are the three big mistakes that most of us make distinguishing selling from closing?
Okay. Number one is we sell way past the close. Way past the close. I mean, we had the deal in the bag, and then 5 minutes later, they're out the door. They can't get away from you fast enough. Okay. And so we sell past the close. The second one is the one that just makes me want to pull my hair out.
I already pulled all my hair out.
Yeah. We forget to ask for the sale. We forget to ask for the close. We just keep selling. And so that's different than selling past the close, by the way. But we just don't even ask for it. We literally don't ask for, the sale. So we go past it. And then the third thing is that people forget that we all want to buy from someone that we like or relate to, and we forget that selling is as much a relationship exchange as it is a product or deal exchange. And so, and of course, Mr. Ziglar was amazing at that through asking questions, and teaching you how to relate to the person so that when they're done, everybody wants the sale to be over, and you vision in your mind, you're walking out of the car dealership, you're arm in arm, and you feel fantastic about what you just bought, and you feel fantastic about the exchange, and everybody wins in this equation. That only happens if there's been some relationship building. If it's purely transactional, then there's a winner and a loser most of the time in a transaction. But in a true sale that's been properly closed, you've got a win-win scenario.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And so what advice would you have for me to make sure I don't, quote unquote, sell past the close? How do I train myself to know they're ready to buy and shut up and actually get the deal done?
Well, in a few months, I'll have a master class that you can sign up for. But right now, I'll give you a little glimpse, and that is, to be really candid, you actually, it's a trial and error process. And so, so you've got to be willing to try, adjust, pivot. And so, so you've got to be willing to do some trial, asks along the way, and be willing to pivot. There's no magic formula for this. So all I can tell you is that most people that sell past the close, they do fit in that category of where they had the deal closed and they didn't recognize it, number one, or they just didn't ask for it, number two, and they go way past it. And some people are just afraid to ask for the close.
Yes.
Because selling can be fun. Closing is where you get a little nervous in your knickers, and you're saying they're going to say yes or no at this point. But here's the deal. If you've learned how to close, then when you're closing, if you get a no, you didn't get a no, you got a not yet. And now you've got valuable data that you can use to adjust to be able to get to the close. But without asking for the close, you're missing that data. And so it may take 2 or 3 times of adjustment to get to the close. But if you haven't asked for the close, if you've taken them, strung them all the way out, and then you're like, do you want it? And they say, no, you got nothing. You're done. That's it. And so, but if you've asked along the way, if you've attempted to start closing, you get valuable data and feedback so that you can then, overcome that and close the sale. And so that's why there's an art form to this. People don't realize it. If you ever were sold something and felt great about it, I guarantee you they used one of Zig Ziglar's tactics. I mean, I talked to a guy yesterday that, he had built, I'll just say who it is. Kevin Harrington, the original shark from Shark Tank, the inventor of the infomercial, told me yesterday that he used secrets to closing the sale to generate $5 billion worth of infomercial sales. Because think about
Mark,
it.
listen, you can't live on that $5 billion, but it is a nice start.
It's a good start. And so, and he said that when he was looking at products, he wasn't looking at products that he could 10x. He wanted 100x. And so you had to be on an infomercial for 30 minutes. I know they're not very common anymore, but you had to use multiple closes to be able to make that work. And he went to school on secrets closing the sale. He applied it in the infomercial space, and obviously the rest is history. And so, so there's a guy who truly understood it was an art form to do it. And we've just lost that. We've lost that art form. We're good at selling. We're very poor at closing. You go to an auto dealership, there's going to be 50 salesmen out there, but only 2 or 3 of them are making any money. What's the difference between the 2 or 3 and the 50? And I'll tell you, it's one thing. They all know how to sell. Those 2 or 3 know how to close. That's it. They're selling the same product to the same customers, yet 2 or 3 of them are killing it, and the rest of them are barely scratching, if not looking for another job. And the difference is not whether or not they know how to sell, it's whether they know how to close. That's the difference.
And I mean, you tell me if you think this is unfair, but if you don't know how to close, you're not a salesperson.
No, I agree.
Right?
Agree, but yet that's why you asked me. This all started from the question about why are entrepreneurs today failing? It's because they haven't taken the time to learn the most valuable thing about selling, which is closing. They've learned the surface. The surface is easy. We can set it up. We can have it rolling. We can start generating sales leads, and that's selling. But closing is the under the surface, the deep dive. You learn that, you're in business. You have a real business, not one you're going to close, but one you're going to pour gas on, because you know how to actually put money in your bank account through closing. And so that's secrets closing the sale. The other thing Mr. Ziglar did, and that we're expanding on as a brand, is he used formulas, okay? And that's one of the ways to keep entrepreneurs from failing is by putting some formulas. Formulas are the guardrails. You're driving down a curvy road and you see these guardrails up. Well, why are they there? It's so that if we fall asleep or swerve, we don't go careening over the cliff. And most entrepreneurs don't put guardrails in place. So all of a sudden they make a wrong turn and they go careening over the cliff, or they have a bad day, or they get a big sale, doesn't happen. And so putting formulas in place, like one of the formulas that we have is a top performance formula. And really drilling down and making that sticky so that, and Mr. Ziglar, he had all kinds of formulas that he used.
Is there an example you could share with me, Mark?
Yeah.
Maybe one of your favorites?
Yeah, one of my favorites. Okay, so he used to have this, his most famous formula, in my opinion, is he would sit people down and talk about skills and attitudes. Okay, so you had attitudes and you had skill. Skill is something you could learn. Attitude was something that you really, brought to the table. And if you had a great attitude but no skill, it was hard to be successful, right? So you were like the most likable person in the world, but no skill. It's going to be hard to put money, in the bank and food on the table. But if you were highly skilled and no attitude, like super skilled, but you had a bad attitude, you were going to struggle as well. And so he basically said that the two of them had a multiplication sign, not an addition sign. It wasn't attitude plus skill. It was attitude times skill, that your attitude magnified and multiplied your skill. Your skill multiplied and magnified your attitude. So you put the two together, they were a multiplier. So 2 plus 2 is, so you start doing this equation. Let's just take 5 plus 5 is 10, but 5 times 5 is 25. So we're magnifying it. Then he went one step further and said, now take that times effort. So attitude times skill times effort. So 5 plus 5 plus 5 is 15, but 5 times effort 5 is 125. So now you're getting up to your 10x multiple of personal performance and even work performance by taking the skill that you have times the attitude that you have times the effort, or attitude, skill, effort. That equals a top performance formula. You remove one of those and you've removed a key component. Now, 5 times 5, that's pretty cool, 25. But wouldn't we all rather have 125? That's where that last piece comes in. So I have skill and attitude. I'm going to put food on the table and money in the bank account. I put extraordinary effort behind it, and I'm going to be putting food on other people's table and bank in other people's bank accounts because they're going to be working for me. That's the top performance formula of attitude plus skill. And that's where it applies to entrepreneurs. A worker for someone else can be successful with attitude and skill. An entrepreneur really needs attitude, skill, and effort to be a top performing entrepreneur.
I love it. It's so true. And here's the other thing I love about it. Often with successful people, I hear things like, oh, well, she's so talented. She's just so talented. And on the surface, I understand, the compliment. And it in our world can feel like a nice thing to say to somebody. And clearly some of us have more abilities in certain areas, and I get all that. But you tell me, Mark, there's no truly successful person that just sat there in the basement drinking beer, even if they had talent and was successful. They had to apply that talent to something, right? So, pick your analogy. Steph Curry, the basketball player, he didn't get to be a world champion just because he, quote unquote, had talent. He had to have attitude, skill, and effort. And he had to have a lot of all three.
Now, we could sit here all day and come up with people who had attitude and skill, and they were successful, skill and effort, and they were successful. But it's the ones that we remember that are like the best of the best, that you have attitude, skill, and effort. I think of one, we talked about sports players. One that comes to mind is Peyton Manning. I mean, the guy, whether you love him, hate him, doesn't matter. You can't deny that one of the reasons he'll go down as one of the best ever is because he not only had skill, but he matched that with a really positive attitude, and he put more effort into the game than most anyone that played the game. He'll go down as one of the best that ever played. Now, there are plenty of professional players that have skill and effort, and they're good, and they put stats on the sheet, and they help win. But when you combine attitude, skill, and effort, those are the ones that we remember. Those are the ones that we memorialize. Those are the ones that hit the Hall of Fame. And it's rare that they don't have all three. Same thing goes with business success. You take somebody whose effort and skill, they may make money, but nobody wants to work for them because they got a horrible attitude. So they're not an entrepreneur, they're a solopreneur. And they'll make some money, but nobody's working for them. And so therefore they're limited in how much they can do. So that's one of my favorite formulas he had. We're actually going to be making that available to the world in 2018 through another masterclass. So we're going to cover the selling side and the personal side. And that's what we're doing. That goes all the way back to your question of what are we doing as a brand to keep this legacy alive? And it really is about legacy, by the way. It's about extending that legacy into future generations. And we're going to do it in a way now through these master classes, through digitizing. Okay, are you ready for this? I've got
ready.
pallets of master tapes in my warehouse right now that I'm convinced some people, other than the people that were there at the event, have never seen. And I'm going through one of the boxes the other day, and it was like April 12th, 1983, April 15th, 1983, May 1st, 1983. They're these huge tapes. I mean, like, I don't
Yeah.
know, 20 inches by 8. I mean, they're just massive masters. And we start looking at these and saying, well, my gosh, this is what people are craving. We threw one of those videos on Facebook the other day with no advertising. 365,000 people viewed it. 365,000 people viewed it because it was real. They knew. I mean, the people who were watching this video in real time had collars that went out to the edge of their shoulders and hair that you could fit a whole, flock of birds in, and so it was the early.
Could you hear Gloria Gaynor's "I Will Survive" playing in the background, or Donna Summer, or?
So why does 365,000 people tune into that? Because we crave real, genuine, authentic, and they trust that it was more real and genuine, because today's message is surface. It's drama. It's questionable. We don't know if we can trust it or not, yet we trust that. And that's part of what we're doing is we're leaning into the trusted message and getting it out to people today in a way that they can digest and consume it.
And when you go through these old tapes or these old talks and stuff, do you feel like you're discovering Beatles songs that have never been heard?
Yeah, I mean, there's this one. We wanted to see how far back we could go and people would actually tune in. And so we went back to one of his original tapes and we put it on Facebook as well. It hit over 300,000. I'm not kidding you. The video camera that was recording this event is as big as your desk. It was like the guy, it was like they were manning a tank gunnery, had these big, these big bars they were twisting it around on, videotaping Mr. Ziglar give this speech. I mean, how
did they mic them? Did they have wireless mics, or did he have to, how did that work?
I don't remember the miking. You can go to Facebook, you can go to our Ziglar Facebook page and you can see it because his whiteboard, was a chalkboard.
Yeah.
He was using a chalkboard.
Right.
Okay? There was no whiteboard. So he was using the old school green chalkboard is what he was using.
The 3M sticky note pads, the giant ones we use for workshops and stuff. Those weren't invented because the sticky note wasn't even invented, right?
But in the speech, he talks about something that he became known for, and he's like, the main element of the speech was there's no elevator to the floor of success. The only way you get there is to take the stairs. Now, guess what? That contradicts so many messages that are out there today. Everybody's selling you an elevator. And they're selling you an elevator, and that's why everybody's returning it, because they figure out very quickly there is no elevator. Zig wasn't selling an elevator. He was selling a set of stairs. And that's why people were successful, because he wasn't selling an elevator. He was saying, you want success? You're going to take the stairs. And if you're willing to take the stairs, I can tell you how you can be successful. But if you want the elevator, good luck.
And the other thing that I've learned, Mark, as I've gotten older, of course, we've all heard the expression, it's not the destination, it's the journey. That was always empty for me. That one didn't help me that much. So just, you know what I mean? But what I really have learned is the reward is the journey. There's actually no destination. And sure, there are outcomes we have and times when we make money and close sales and maybe you sell a company or go public or whatever it is you do. So there are big events that happen along the way that are certainly outcomes worthy of celebration and so forth. But what I've learned is, I used to have this unquestioned thought in the back of my head that I didn't even sort of realize was there, which was, when I get to some level, whether it was a title or, income or net worth or whatever it was, or even things that I'd accomplished where I could be proud of myself, right? That then it would really be my life. Then I'd be where I'm supposed to be. Then I'd be who I'm supposed to be. And what I've learned is the reward is, while those big milestones along the way are great, the real reward is every day getting up and doing something that you find to be legendary, where you can make a difference and do something that matters. That's the real reward. So
Without a doubt.
I guess I'm curious. What did Zig tell us about to your point, the joy of walking those stairs?
Yeah, well, he he talked a lot about the journey, without a doubt. I mean, he basically, I guess part of what I want to tell you is that he wasn't afraid to say that sometimes there's not joy in some of the stairs.
Yeah.
That's the
Sometimes
realness
it
and the
sucks.
genuine. Sometimes it's hard. And that's where it's attitude, skill, and then the last one, and he always put the last one last, which was effort. There wasn't he could interchange attitude and skill. Those could go first, second, doesn't matter. But the third one was always effort, because it takes effort. And I don't know about you, but if I had to climb, right now 50 floors of stairs, somewhere along the way, I'm going to be saying the elevator looks pretty darn good. And so, I'm going to be wishing I'd, step out. Maybe I could find an elevator on that floor. And so what he did, though, was it wasn't that the stairs were joyful as much as it was what we were working towards. It was reaching that floor was where the joy was. And it was knowing it was achieving goals. I mean, he's one of the first people that said, there's no way you're going to make it up to the stairs of success if you don't have goals. And how many of us don't have written down specific goals? We just don't. Why is that? That's crazy. We know that formula works, but he would say, you got to have goals. And you've got to have certain kinds of goals. They have to be specific. They have to be written down. Otherwise, you're going to get to a certain floor and you're going to say, I'm out. I'm going to take the elevator from here on. And so he gave a lot of ways to stay on that journey, and he helped us to see that it was worth it, that reaching that level was worth it. But the biggest thing that I just want to say is he never said it was easy. He never said that there wouldn't be some failure, that there wouldn't be some hard spots. But he said it would be worth it. And to me, that's the message that people are appreciating. Nobody wants to tell anybody they're going to fail. Nobody, I mean, we're in an era where all kids get trophies. There's always all winners.
Keep score at t-ball or baseball.
And so we're not going to tell anybody that they failed or they didn't succeed. And then that flows out through life. But the fact is that doesn't make the reward, that floor to success, worth it. It means we just get off when we're tired or we have to work too hard or we start to sweat. And that's the reality. And I think that's why the message is refreshing. He didn't, in this speech that all these thousands of people, like 5,000 people shared this thing.
Wow.
And it was a speech of life is tough, but the reward is worth it if you stick to the journey. And everybody's sharing this. And it's like, whoa, people want to hear that everything isn't perfect, that life is going to be tough, but it's rewarding if you'll stick to the plan.
There's two things as you're talking that really sort of hit me. One is it's a huge part of why we wanted to name Legends and Losers, right? Because there's no such thing as a legend that's not a loser. Right. And of course, it's easy to forget that. And it's easy, to your point on the new format for the Ziglar podcast, it's easy to forget that it's the losing that makes us legendary. Most of us don't learn that much by succeeding. Right. It's when we lose that we learn. The other one that I think for me, that one I've understood for a long time. And I think a lot of people understand that one. The other one for me that is really in focus in a way that it hasn't been before is if you take attitude, skill, and effort, if you take that effort out, because it's those three things that ultimately lead to achievement, right?
Right.
And when you get to really achieve things in your life, so in other words, when you get to, let me say it this way, when you get to achieve things, at least for me, and this may sound corny, Mark, it's a source of peace in my life. Because I know the person that brushes my teeth every day knows what I'm made of, knows what I'm capable of. And so my center of gravity, if you will, is a lot different, because I know that I'm the designer of my life. I know that I'm able to go out and produce results at a very high level. And having done that in my life gives me not just the good feelings of accomplishment and all that, which of course it does, but for me personally, it's a source of peace, because as corny as it might sound, I know that I fulfilled, the kinds of things that I'm supposed to fulfill in life. I know that I'm being the person I'm supposed to be. And, my goal in life is to try to become half the man my mother thinks I am. And so I guess I'm looking for some comment or some reaction from you on, there's all of the awesomeness that comes with achievement, but at this personal level of peace and happiness inside your own skin, knowing that you've been able to produce some of these results. Could you kind of open that up a little bit?
Yeah, I sure can, because it's real easy. I'm gonna share. I said I would only do one formula, but I'll give you another one. And
Thanks.
so, because I'm gonna add a little twist to the piece that you're talking about. So Mr. Ziglar used to say he would help people go from survival mode, which a lot of us find ourselves in, and he would go from survival mode, and he would be able to take people to stability. So survival is where we're barely hanging on, we're drowning, if you will. And then we would go, and he could get you to stability, and then from stability to success. But what he found is that all successful people were actually craving something else, which was significance. And that piece that you're talking about happens in significance. Okay, so success is that part of the journey where we're starting to recognize that we're doing some things right. We start to get a piece when we hit significance, because we start to realize that we matter, and that we're fulfilling some purpose that we were put on the earth. None of us know our true potential. It's a lifelong journey to discover our true potential, and some would say it's a lifelong journey to discover your true purpose. But I think some of us find it. But when we start to land in significance is where we start to get that peace, because if you're a driven person at all, there's this churning inside of you that says, I ultimately want to know that I've been significant, and that I've done something significant. And you start to get some peace there, because you're fulfilling some of your potential and your purpose. But ultimately, where this twist that I'm talking about goes is that what we all really want is legacy. We all really want legacy. And that's, when I think of legends and losers, you can point to so many, legacy, kind of people that I'm sure you've interviewed and that we can talk about. But ultimately, I'm going to say that deep down in all of us, we want to know that we left a legacy. And as parents, we want to leave a living legacy in our children, to know that they're going to be good fathers and mothers and brothers and sisters and workers. But even in our businesses, we ultimately want to know that we left a legacy, that it transferred, that some of our significance, because that's where legacy comes into play, is once you've hit that point of significance, now you want to transfer that piece. You want to transfer that formula. You want to transfer that journey to others, so that they can experience stability, success, significance, and ultimately leave their own legacy. And that's where I think you're probably at. You've got a piece of significance. So significance is helping you with this inner peace, but there's still part of you that says, but what's my legacy going to be? And you have an opportunity to pass that on, because legacy is transference. Legacy is not an event. Legacy is you transfer that you've learned and the wisdom that you have to others, and you leave this lasting legacy that lives beyond us.
I love what you're saying. It's very, very clarifying. It describes exactly sort of where my headset's at. And the other thing I would sort of add to it is, of course we all want to be remembered. Of course we do.
Yeah.
And I'm not stupid. most of us are forgotten in a few generations. My grandfather, Jack, was an absolutely legendary man. And, his great grandchildren are not going to know very much about him. I'm going to tell them, but they're not going to know. Right. And so I'm not stupid. That said, that desire to make a difference is a very, very powerful one, particularly for those of us for how do I want to say this? For those of us who've been given so much, right? The way I feel about it is, yes, I want to be remembered. Yes, I'd love to have a legacy. But that's not what's in the front of my head most of the time, Mark. What's in the front of my head is, I've been given so much. Can I 100x give back more than I've been given, right? That's why it breaks my heart that we're at this situation with entrepreneurship, because I think entrepreneurship is, for some of us, it's a way up, and that's a wonderful, spectacular motivation. And as we talked about when you were kind enough to have me on the Ziglar show, for me, entrepreneurship was a way out. And the interesting thing is, as we lift ourselves out, we lift the world out. And I just want to share with you one other thing on legacy. We've had this very powerful experience here in my hometown of Santa Cruz, California, over the last little bit. This man named Jack O'Neill recently died. And Jack is the founder of the O'Neill Surf Company. And he's the inventor, entrepreneur, and category designer who brought the wetsuit to the world. And before Jack, it was some kind of cold in the North Pacific surfing. And when Jack was still alive, Mark, when you would see him around town, the appropriate greeting, and virtually everybody in Santa Cruz knew this and said it to him, was "Thanks, Jack." And right after he died, at the main O'Neill surf shop, and the sign is still up today, he died June, July. There's a big, big sign in the main windows. You drive by their main store and office, and it's got a great picture of Jack. He had an eye patch and a beard. He looks like this great, nautical pirate, how you'd want, Jack to look. And there's a big sign next to his face, and there's big, big block lettering next to his face, and it said, "Legends never die."
Love it. Love it. There's so much we can learn from legends. I mean, I love the name of your show, but there's so much we can learn. And what's the difference between a legend and somebody like, my grandfather, your grandfather, that lots of people showed up and paid their respects, but, we know them and we keep their legacy going. But then there are people who live on. And I think there's so much we can learn, from them to even apply in our small scale of our lives, and so, like I said, Zig Ziglar impacted 250 million people while he was on earth. And this is what people don't know. He didn't give his first professional motivational speech until he was 45 years old. 45 years old.
And when Zig was 45, 45 is different than it is today, right?
Well, I sure hope so, because
at least that's what we got to tell ourselves here, right?
I want to. So,
Mark, is there anything else before we kick out of this wave, my friend?
No, I just want to thank you for your time. I love the deep dive and the subject matter we covered. I love that the impact that Zig Ziglar made in your life, my life, and I think one of the best things we can all do is do inventory. I mean, take inventory of our lives. Remember how we got here, who was responsible. Tell those people by a handwritten letter or face-to-face that we're grateful. And then take that inventory, compile it, and build from it. I mean, you let that be your foundation of saying, I'm not, if I fall down, I've got this foundation that people, poured in my life. Look at it like a concrete foundation. All these people poured this foundation so that I can't fall beyond this point, because they poured this concrete foundation. It'll keep me at baseline. I got nowhere to go but up from here. And that's what I found in my life. And Zig Ziglar obviously was one of those people. I said at the beginning of the show, I don't think it's impossible in the digital age that we can't add a zero onto that 250 million. And I would love that as part of my legacy is to extend the Zig Ziglar legacy into a couple billion more people.
Well, and as you know, to the discussion we had on entrepreneurship, the world has never needed Zig more.
You're right. Amen. That's exactly right. You're completely right, especially young entrepreneurs. Young entrepreneurs need this kind of content in their head so that they can get the right kind of output. Change the input, you'll get a different output. And that's so simple, but it's got to be embraced and understood.
And would it be fair to say, Mark, and I'm just grabbing the quote because I want to get it perfectly, that this may be Zig's most famous quote, you can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want.
Well, if you're a young entrepreneur and you'd like to impact 250 million people with your idea, product, or concept, I would say if you were going to hang your hat or your business on one quote, that's the one.
That's the one.
Because that's the one.
Well, maybe that's a good place to land this, Mark.
Love it.
Listen, I can't thank you enough for your time, for your commitment. Please tell Tom and the rest of the Ziglar family how much I love them, how much I appreciate them. I will forever be in a deep way, not in a surface way, grateful for the automobile university that Zig took me to, because regular university was not an option for me. And, I just got to thank you and Kevin and everybody at Ziglar because of this interaction. You guys have given me Zig back in a very powerful way. It wasn't that I forgot about him. I always knew he was there and so forth, but you guys have reconnected me with him, and I've gotten all of you guys in my life. And so I feel just incredibly thankful for that.
Well, you're very welcome. And as of last count and growing, there's about 30,000 of our tried and true loyals that have downloaded your message and growing by the day. And so clearly your message resonates with our tribe as well. And so I love the interaction. I love finding, people that were impacted through Automobile University, through Zig Ziglar, and seeing now that you're touching so many lives as a result of that. So in a way, I just want to part by saying you are a living legacy of Mr. Ziglar, and that's pretty cool.
Well, thank you. I'm so glad you think so. I hope he thinks so too. I know that, I can swear a little more than he might have appreciated and maybe be a little bit more outrageous than certainly he was in some ways. But I come from hopefully that good place, and he taught me a lot and gave me a lot. And I really appreciate you saying that, Mark.
Cool. Thank you.
Bless you. Whew. There it is. Thanks again, Mark. That was fantastic. And if you know somebody who would love this episode as much as I did, please share it with them now. And I would highly, highly encourage you to check out the Ziglar.com and the Ziglar podcast, the Ziglar Show. Most legendary podcast. And if you're in sales, or frankly, if you're somebody who just wants to take your performance up to a whole new place, check out Ziglar.com. All right. We would like to thank HarperCollins, bestseller Play Bigger, How Pirates, Dreamers, and Innovators Create and Dominate Markets. Equity Directory, connecting startups to the talent and resources they need to build a legendary business. Check us out at equitydirectory.co. OneLifeFullyLived.org, the nonprofit helping you dream, plan, and live your best life. Check us out at OneLifeFullyLived.org. Stephen Wassner's hit podcast, Onward Nation. I was so stoked to be a guest, and Stephen's an incredible guy. He's also been on Legends and Losers. Check out Onward Nation. Habitat for Humanity, Building New Futures. Jörg Sperry, realtor in Marin County. Make Kentfield, Ross, and San Rafael make those dreams for you happen. Check out Jörg Sperry. Brother James, the motivational music master for your next event. Want to have some music and motivation together? Check them out at brotherjames.com. And A Spectacular Catastrophe and other things I recommend. The amazing book by our friend and multi-time guest, the incredible Dushka Zapata. We'd like to remind you that today's information is provided to you solely for informational purposes and that this oddcast is the sole property of the Legends and Losers Oddcast Network, and we would be stoked if you shared the shit out of it. We must warn you, this oddcast is produced clearly in a studio that contains nuts, and Legends and Losers will make you better looking. Learn sales skills. Don't jog around a prison. 5 a.m. is the time of day where legendary starts or finishes. Introduce two people you love to two podcasts you love. And hey, Colin, this oddcast really ties the room together, doesn't it? Thank you, Candy Dandy. We love you. And our apologies today go to Kim Kardashian. Sorry, Kimmy. We just ran out of time for you. That's it, my friends. Thanks for investing part of your life with us. And we'll look forward to seeing you again soon on another episode of Legends and Losers.